and welcome to my tutorial on amplitude modulation. What is it? Why is it so cool? What does it sound like? How do you use it? And what tools can make it happen? So let me go into Ableton and just talk a little bit about amplitude modulation. So usually modulation is a value going up and down that's controlling something, and that would be, in this case, the amplitude or volume of something. So technically speaking, if I create an envelope and I control the volume of this oscillator, technically that is amplitude modulation. So if I get an LFO and I go in here and get an envelope type shape that's looping, and I map it to the amplitude, so if I get a little plucky thing going on, watch what happens when I turn the speed of this up. So that would be audio rate amplitude modulation, also known as ring modulation. So if we get a ring mod out, I believe that they have a ring mod in here. Yes, ring mod. So if I play a note, and then I start messing with this, so what a ring mod is doing is it's actually got an oscillator in here, and it's modulating the amplitude. So if I can change this to self, sideband, bandpass, noise, and these are some really cool things you can use to modulate the amplitude really fast. So that's a great tool to use. So now that you understand what amplitude modulation is, let's go into our oscillators and mess around with amplitude modulation inside of Faceplant, because Faceplant is one of the best synths to experiment with AM. It's a really incredible synth for doing phase modulation, frequency modulation, and the too often overlooked amplitude modulation. So let's start amplitude modulating the audible oscillator from an inaudible source. Kind of just pitched it up an octave. So now let's mess with the phase. Doesn't really change the pitch much, but if you look up here, it's DC offset. And we can get it back into alignment by changing the phase here to like 90 degrees would be 90 degrees out of phase with this, and now it's right back in phase. So the phase is important to tweak when you're doing this. So let's now try some different waves. So it really becomes apparent what's happening when you start to pitch this oscillator around. So let's start pitching it around. So it really starts to get fun when you start modulating the volume of this oscillator. So let's get another oscillator out, and let's start modulating the amplitude or volume of this oscillator with another one. Now what we could do is maybe have a couple modulators, and we could just start to modulate. Put these on unipolar, and then we can start modulating the amount. So this little star. And you can also get some pretty cool sounds when you start modulating the pitch of these. So maybe I have an envelope that's just, or an LFO set to a down ramp on unipolar and retrigger, and let's put it on like quarter notes or 16th notes. Let's just modulate the pitch of this going down an octave or so. Let's do it with this one as well. So it can get really interesting when you start introducing more complex wavetables. So let's go into some of these other wavetables in phase plant and see what kind of cool combinations we can get. So a lot of interesting kind of timbres are to be found doing that. But let's now talk about distortion and amplitude modulation, and let's kind of explore that a little bit. So let me get a distortion out. I'm going to get the M Wave Shaper, which is a free plugin. Fantastic. And I'm going to do a little bit of wave folding here on this sine wave. So if I make a point here, and then I zoom in real close to this bottom left-hand corner, I can start doing some interesting kind of stuff with, maybe we'll do some triangles here. So do a little bit of triangle. And then maybe right here we'll do a sine. And for educational purposes, it could be cool to see this in an oscilloscope. So I'm going to get the M oscilloscope out. Maybe right here we'll do pulse. Maybe right here we'll do a few more sines. So if you use an oscilloscope, you can really see how this is a picture of the waveform. And right now we're using symmetrical, but we could turn on asymmetric, and then that'll give us a different result. And then these other things will give us a symmetrical result too, or different result too. But let's do like a little DC block. So you can see that the sound doesn't sound very different, but look at how much that changes the wave. So doing some weird stuff there. So why am I doing this? Well, because we're going to get a lot of cool tonal movement when we start modulating the amplitude of this wave into this into this wave folder. So let's go and get a simple LFO. We'll do kind of a Again, we'll do this shape. So a really fun way to make basses. But, so we're doing LFO rate amplitude modulation. Now let's try doing a little bit of audio rate amplitude modulation. So what if I do an octave up, maybe even 2 octaves up, and then I get a wave table, and I'm going to pitch it 2 octaves up in a harmonic relationship and not in equal temperament. So what I mean by that is I'm going to use the harmonic here. And second harmonic is an octave up. But it's not an octave in equal temperament. It's an exact times 2 of the frequency. 3 is going to be 19 semitones kind of sounding like, but it's actually 3 times the speed. So you hear that as kind of a fifth. And then if I do 4, it's 2 octaves. So it's like a harmonically perfect double octave. And now we have this fundamental down here because it's set to the first harmonic. So this is going to sound a lot slower and lower than this upper one. So what happens if we amplitude modulate it? Pretty cool. What if we do a reverse modulation now with our slow LFO on the volume of this oscillator? And something you can do in Faceplant that's kind of interesting is you can like cross modulate. So what if we now in turn modulate the sub with this one? What will happen? Will it break? I wonder if it'll break. Kind of interesting. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. As like a top bass. So what we could do is maybe do another group and then a sub and then an output. So now that we have that, we could actually maybe spread this top one and high pass it. And remember, these are just sine waves pretty much. So what if we mess with that ring mod again? Let's send our sub to lane 2. And then let's send this one like it is to lane 1, and let's put a ring mod on here. We could try self. We could try bandpass noise. Kind of nice. What if we do the sideband? So not a ton of cool results there, but something to try. We could also maybe do a group and just have some noise. Some noise going through that would be nice. Maybe bandpass noise. So do a bandpass, put it up in the highs, and then output. And then we could take our sub and modulate the amplitude of the noise. Maybe we have the noise get quieter as everything else gets louder. Now, if we mess with this main envelope for the volume, it's going to change a lot of the character. don't have to use multiple of these envelopes, but if you want to use an unsynced time and keep everything in time, you can slow the LFO all the way down, or maybe let's slow it down just to like 50 hertz, and then we can use a macro to control this LFO's speed and then duplicate it, and it'll keep that macro mapping, and now we can change the shape of this. So maybe this we want to just use as like a pitch envelope. So yeah, cool way to make basses using a lot of amplitude modulation. We're not even using any FM or anything in here. It's just a couple sine waves. And really this M wave shaper is doing a lot of the work. So why should you use M wave shaper when you could buy the M wave shaper multiband, or M folder for that matter? But let's go into the multiband version, because this is not just better because it's multiband. It's also better for a couple other reasons. So if I click edit here, we have access to up to 6 bands of wave shaping, which is cool. Let's start with 1. And you can see it looks pretty similar. So we could do kind of a similar thing where we go down here and we can scroll and zoom in on this one, and we can just kind of zoom in here. And right here maybe we'll do some sines. Maybe right here we'll do a little bit of stairs maybe. So now, check this out. This is only available in the multiband version. You have all these little multi-parameters. These are called multi-parameters. And you can use these basically as macros. So we could take multi-parameter 4 here, which is not being used. If we click on this little hamburger menu, it'll open up an option to learn, clear and learn, or quick learn, and then also reset and all this. So if you click on the multi-parameter itself, it opens up the window where you can edit the multi-parameter. So you can name it, and you can change the way it works. Like you can have it normal, switch, trigger, banks, which is like multi parameters. It's really an insanely deep way to manage macros. There's a lot of kind of fine-tuning control you can do in here. So how you map this is I'm going to right-click on this and hit Learn, and then I can move these around. So maybe I want it to let me manipulate that within that range, this up and down, and maybe a little bit right to left. And I'd like to move this one right to left. And then this one I'd like to move up and down. And now if I click it again, right up here where it says record, I just click that. Now I can morph this shape. And if I click on it, I can choose how I want these to behave. So I can set like a minimum and maximum value for each one of these parameters. Maybe for this one, maybe for one of these, I want to invert. Let's try inverting a couple more. Let's invert this one. Maybe this one, invert. So that's pretty cool. Another thing with MWaveshaper is you can go into the settings, and if you're getting some weird artifacts, you can go into the interpolation and put it on high or extreme or very high or whatever. And that just kind of uses more CPU but also sounds better. So let's go on very high. We can boost the drive. So we can almost use that as like a wavetable, like we can automate that. So if I go up here, and then remember our macro from before? This is cool to automate too. So I can start modulating this macro. So you can get these kind of cool rhythms, and then since that LFO is on retrigger, it'll restart wherever we put a note. So we could put like a note every bar here, and that way it'll be a little bit more in time. So that's a pretty cool bass line. All you have to do is slap drums on that, and you got a dubstep slap. So yeah, that's kind of my approach on making like bass donk things, using wave shaping and amplitude modulation and faceplant. So yeah, I hope you got some ideas about how to make some sounds. It's always useful to know how to use all the different types of sound design. That way you know how to bring them all together in patches or to have them call and respond, because it can be really nice to have a big like FM bass and then there's like a different sounding bass made with wave shaping and amplitude modulation, so it sounds kind of contrasting. And then maybe you have an old school subtractive type Reese bass, and then you have, you know, some sort of additive type bass. So it's really cool to be able to understand how all these different types of synthesis work, and then you can also bring them together in a whole patch like this one where I'm using amplitude modulation and wave shaping together to get that kind of synergistic effect. So I'm basically starting with really clean sine waves and then creating the harmonics with wave shaping. I really highly recommend M Wave Shaper multiband, but if you look at Trash, one of the most overlooked features of Trash is its wave shaper, I feel like, but it's really where you get a lot of the work done in Trash. So if I go back here, in Trash, you have this really amazing wave shaper, and it works just the same as the one I was talking about just a second ago. You have this smooth slider, so you can like smooth out your shape that you draw, which is really cool. You can do logarithmic mode, which will change the response. It has a built-in DC filter to filter off your DC offset that you might cause. And if you right-click on these nodes, you can choose the same shaping modes or folding modes that I was talking about earlier. So this kind of tension is kind of like a linear / curvy, you know, thing. You can do fully linear, and then you can still curve it, but it's different. And then you know, obviously sine is going to sound really nice and squelchy. Triangle is going to sound kind of almost like the sine, but a little bit more like bit crushy. And then if you want to go full bit crush, you can do stairs, and that'll give you a lot of nice crunchy, like bit reduction-y type effects. And you know, you can zoom in to whatever quadrant you want. And if you go over here, you can set it from unipolar to bipolar, which means like in Rift, you can affect the negative part of the sine wave or the signal differently than the positive. So you could like do this kind of thing and have like a totally different shape for the positive and the negative. So even without using any of these algorithms, if you just use this wave shaper, you can get a lot of really cool effects. And then obviously it has multi-band, and then you have a new wave shaper for each band. So you can get a lot of definition and more subtle definition out of it if you use the multiband. And the last thing you should know about Trash with the multiband is if you go into options and turn on the resampling or the oversampling, you're going to have a much cleaner, less smearing type effect because the splitting is going to be oversampled and the distortion is going to be oversampled. Note you can also change the type of limiter. You can change the slope of the filters that are splitting into bands, and you can also actually do 4 bands. So by default, it only gives you 3, but you can actually do 4 bands of distortion. So on each one of these bands, you can have 2 stages of distortion, and each stage has its own wave shaper. So if you don't want to spend the $200 or whatever it is to get M Wave Shaper, know that Trash, which you probably already have, is an incredible wave shaper. And as soon as you get an idea of what's happening in this graph, then you can really start to use wave shaping to your advantage. And like I said, the best way to get to know what you're doing with a wave shaper is just to start playing around with sending sine waves and different types of basic wave shapes through it. Put an oscilloscope after it, this M oscilloscope. This is free, you can download that. And just look at the wave and then make some changes and continue looking at the wave and see what parts of the wave you're changing the shape of, and then you'll get a really clear understanding of like, okay, so if I mess with the bottom left corner, I'm going to mess closer to the 0 crossing. And yeah, as soon as you get a hang of how your wave shapers work, you'll be able to use them on everything and get anything from subtle to super over the top results. So yeah, kind of a compound tutorial right here. It was supposed to kind of bring attention to amplitude modulation as well, but it turned out to be kind of a wave shaping / amplitude modulation thing, because I think they go well together. So also, yeah, just experiment with more amplitude modulation. Not a lot of synths have it, but I'll show you one more thing. So if we go over here and we just get a sample, like, I don't know, any sample. If we get a sample here and we get maybe, let's get something, let's use an EEPROM sample. Yeah, let's use an EEPROM Reese. So if we turn this into a sampler, check this out. So in the modulation tab here, the pitch / oscillator tab, if we turn on this oscillator, you have FM, which you're going to know the sound of. And then you can open this up. So that's really useful. And then you also have AM, which is amplitude modulation. So that gets really interesting when you start putting organic type sounds in there. So I could get some Foley. Oops, accidentally double clicked it. Yeah, so like some balloon stretching sounds. That sounds crazy. And then you have all these different wave shapes. You have like all the operator wave shapes, so including noise. Really great way to add some noise into your sample. You know, square sounds crazy. So when you modulate the pitch of your amplitude modulation oscillator, you can get a lot of cool kind of formant sounds. Wow. So yeah, definitely don't sleep on samplers' amplitude modulation. So yeah, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. I'm Sephiros. Check me out on everything, all the platforms. Music is on all the platforms. I have a Patreon where I got thousands of samples if you want that for $6. And then I have a separate tier for lessons. If you want feedback on your music, let me know. And yeah, like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. You are the best. And yeah, until next time, I'm Sephiros. Peace out.